Good evening, Richard. The reason I asked you to come in was to see how you were doing after you were exposed as a fraud on the internet. I have been monitoring your progress on AgWeb from my PC, and I must say, it was quite a weekend.
Yes, it was quite a weekend. Being stripped bare, right down to my manhood, for the entire world to see. I was beginning to think it was the end. I was on an emotional roller coaster. At one point I thought I was going over the buffalo jump. Was cornered like an animal from every side. It was a dark time, seeing my fantasy fading away, feeling helpless to prevent it.
As a mental health professional, I can only say I was really worried. Ghostwriter and his investigative team did an exceptional job of vetting you. I was expecting this AgWeb crew to be a bunch of uneducated misfits from the way you described them. A group of hillbillies and morons.
That is what they are, Doctor. Don't let all of the facts they presented proving my identity as a pencil-necked, darky accountant from Apple Valley, Minnesota fool you. No one can take anything they say seriously. I am still Iowa corn farmer. Make no mistake about it.
Perhaps, Richard, you should take what I have to say seriously. One of my last clients was Heath Ledger. His fictional movie character became so real to him that he couldn't separate fantasy from reality. I do not wish to see you reach this point of no return.
I am Iowa corn farmer. That is who I am now. I wish you would stop calling me Richard.
At one point this weekend, I thought you had finally come to your senses. You were finally afforded the opportunity to come clean, to make a new start with a group of guys and gals who would eagerly accept you for who you really are. Richard, the accountant.
What kind of life would that be, now that I have experienced what it is like being a filthy rich Iowa farmer? I was respected, revered, the envy of everyone who knew me. I had reached the pinnacle of success. At the darkest moment, however, John Faust came to my defense. John is the only successful farmer on AgWeb. He is like me, a self-made man, overcoming the obstacles of life. John is a lawyer, a successful accountant like me. I mean like Richard, that little fellow in Apple Valley that I don't want to be. John ran interference for me. He was brilliant. Not only did he tell everyone I was for real, he managed to change the subject, the focus of the entire debate. All of a sudden, John put everyone on defense.
I, for one, was able to see through your friend John's argument. Do you think he managed to convince anyone that you were actually this fantasy Iowa corn farmer?
Perhaps you missed some of the action this weekend. John started a new thread, asking everyone on AgWeb to come clean themselves. To admit they were just a bunch of losers who had inherited their farmland. I couldn't believe it. One by one they came, each one confessing. I thought I was the priest in a confessional. They were laying it all out there. I now know how many acres they own and farm. If it were family land or purchased. Whether they borrowed any money and how long it took to pay it back, they left nothing to the imagination. It was eye-opening. Finally, Ghostwriter was exposed for the fraud he was, living in squalor on an Indian reservation in a 53-foot reefer converted into a mobile home. I was feeling sorry for him, and his wife having to live like that. Tears were filling my eyes.
It would appear to me that these individuals were simply being honest. Not ashamed of who they really are. They felt comfortable in their own skin, not feeling a need to become some fantasy that everyone would hopefully admire.
I didn't see it that way. I look at their miserable lives and I feel sorry for all of them. It is truly sad to live like that, when you could simply live your fantasy like I do as Iowa corn farmer. It was a pathetic display of humanity on parade. Surely you can understand my dilemma. Heaven forbid I would go back to being a boring pencil pusher living in Minneapolis, with a wife who wears the pants since her inherited farmland is my only success, and a son who is on the injured list on the high school football team. I choose rather to be Iowa corn farmer. My brother-in-law in Iowa who doesn't know anything about my fantasy life.
So where do you think you stand now with the folks on AgWeb?
I am Iowa corn farmer. Before this whole ghostwriter thing started, I was worth $25 million, had 2,300 acres and a 50,000 head hog operation. When the weekend was over, everyone saw that I was worth much more than that. I convinced everyone that the house in Apple Valley was now worth $600,000 after I added a room over the garage and I installed a big screen TV. In addition, they now believe that I manage 6,000 acres and have 2 more houses, both of which are bigger and worth more money than my bungalow in Apple Valley.
Go on.
I extended an olive branch to the entire AgWeb community. In fact, they are all planning on coming over to my fantasy house and having a fantasy dinner and drinks with me and my wife. It will be a glorious time, all of them there, admiring me living in opulence, fulfilling my fantasy.
How does your wife feel about all of this?
You simply do not understand. I am talking about my fantasy wife. My trophy wife. A long-legged brunette with a large set of tattoos. It is a fantasy dinner. Everyone from AgWeb will be there. In their minds they could envision it all while I was describing it. The food, the wine. I offered to take the entire group on a trip to Iowa in my magic bus to visit my brother-in-law, tour his 2,300-acre farm and hog facility. Then we could head over to my ethanol plant and watch them make DDGS. Dairy farmer even agreed to come and spend the night. I told him he could even share the bedroom with my wife and I during his visit.
What happens when he discovers that Iowa corn farmer's wife is just a fantasy?
Well, then it will just be dairy farmer and I in bed. And I can begin living out another one of my fantasies.
So Richard, what you are saying is that you feel safe, since no one on AgWeb would actually show up to your fantasy get-together.
Now you get it. It is a brilliant plan, perfectly executed in every detail.
I believe you are correct when you say none of them would show up. What person in their right mind would drive to Minnesota to meet with a schizophrenic, a complete psychopath?
My thoughts exactly, Doctor.
Richard, I must tell you, I found your death threat to ghostwriter a little disturbing. The next knock on your door might not be someone from AgWeb, but rather a SWAT team.
I was just trying to make a point to ghostwriter. To let him know that Iowa corn farmer had some cojones. In reality, he thinks he is dealing with a scrawny wimp who hasn't lifted anything heavier than a coffee cup. When he envisions Iowa corn farmer, I want him to see me as the macho dude that I really wish I were. He respects John Faust. I even recall him saying that John was like his grandfather figure. Not to fear, Doctor. He won't be showing up. After all, I threatened to throw him in an abandoned well on one of my 10 farms in Iowa. That is a play out of the John Faust playbook. He uses that threat when he wants everyone to know what a badass he is. And it seems to work.
Let me make a point, Richard. From what I've seen of ghostwriter, perhaps you shouldn't let your mouth write checks that your ass could never cash.
Doctor, you need to get in my fantasy. That way when you look across your desk, you will be able to see Iowa corn farmer.
Well, Richard, I see that our time is up for today's session. I'll be writing you a prescription for your new medications. Hopefully, we will see some improvement on your next visit.